Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Evan's going to be teaching you a tremolo picking etude that I wrote, which features a melody inspired by classical music. Now let's take a second to talk about tremolo picking technique, because it's one of those techniques that comes with a wow factor. It's a technique used by virtuosos such as Jake or Taimane, and in a nutshell, it simply means that you are playing single notes across one string at supersonic speeds. So let's actually take a look at what that looks like. And to do so, let's go ahead and put up the first line of tab. So on this first line of tab, I want you just to narrow in on measure number 1. So let's ignore measure number 2. So if we look at measure number 1, we can see 4 quarter notes, but those 4 quarter notes have a little double dash. That double dash signifies that we are going to be playing each of these 4 quarter notes as 16th notes. So we want to not play this opening measure as quarter notes going 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead, we want to play it as 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So in other words, I'm playing each note 4 times. Now, of course, it's pretty easy to do what I just did. The hard thing is to build the speed so that your tremolo picking technique sounds really fluid. So getting it to sound like that with that fluidity in every single note you play, that is the ultimate goal, as well as getting it up to tempo. And the speed that you're going to be reaching for as the goal for this piece is going to be 180 beats per minute. So very, very fast, but remember, start slow, work it up to speed. So throughout this tune, keep that in mind that you want to be playing each note 4 times every time you see those double dash lines. Now, there are many ways that you can do this technique. You can do the technique as I demonstrated, which is literally just using a pick. Or you could use the thumb, which is actually the way that Matt prefers to do this. And I'll go ahead and link the lesson that we did where he teaches how to do this technique using the thumb. I'll link it here and as well as in the description box below. Or you could use a thumb pick, and Matt actually touches on that a little bit in his lesson. Or you could use your index finger. So let me explain that. The index finger is the way that Evan likes to do the technique. Essentially, if we're holding a pick, if we get rid of the pick, but we keep this shape, so you can see how my index finger sticks out slightly from my thumb, right? So my index finger is sticking out slightly from my thumb. I'm going to keep that shape intact, and I can use the tip of my index finger instead of a pick. So that method is the way that Evan likes to do it, and I'm going to let him explain it in a little bit more detail at the start of his lesson. But there's really no right or wrong. There's so many different ways that you can do this technique, and I want to keep it open-ended and just experiment and figure out which way works the best for you. For me personally, it's always been using a pick. Now, let's take a step back and let's talk a little bit about this lesson. So in this video, Evan's going to be teaching you how to play the entire etude, but if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site, rockclass101.com, do a search for the song's name. Now also on that page will be the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you want. Just a great asset in learning this tune that much easier. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Evan to teach you how to play this. You can use the high G or the low G ukulele, does not matter because you're going to be playing exclusively on the A string. So I'll catch you at the end of the video.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan and I'll be teaching today's lesson on the Tremolo Picking Etude. Now before we get started, I'd like to go deeper into the tremolo picking technique that I use, which involves the index finger. But as Andrew stated earlier, there are multiple ways to play a tremolo, like with your thumb or with a pick. So really it's up to you to decide which is the best way for you. So for me, I like to imagine that I'm holding a pick like this, but then my index finger comes slightly out of the thumb like this, and I use my index fingernail to attack the string. So yes, I do grow out my nails on the index finger especially so that I get the right tone of attack. So then I position my index slightly past the sound hole into the fretboard, and I do an up-down motion, mainly relying on my wrist for the fluidity. Notice how my arm stays at the same position with only my wrist moving. Now this is important because if your entire arm moves like this, the movement is very big and it requires a lot of effort. So your stamina will run out very fast, especially when you're playing the tremolo technique for long durations. So ensure that your arm doesn't move much with only your wrist doing most of the work. Now with that being said, I'll be teaching you the main melody in quarter notes first before we actually move on to apply the tremolo picking technique, just so that we can solidify the left hand muscle memory before moving on to the right hand. All right, now let's get started on measures 1 to 2. Here's how it should sound like in quarter notes. All right, so start with your ring finger on the 10th fret of the bottom string, pluck that. Then index finger to the 7th fret, pluck that. Ring finger to the 9th fret, pluck that. Index to the 5th, pluck that. And moving on to the next measure, ring finger on the 7th fret, pluck that. Index to the 4th fret, pluck that. And middle finger to the 5th fret, pluck that. And finally, lift up your finger to play the open A string. Now I'd like to mention that while playing each note, you can rest the other fingers of your fretted hand lightly on the unused strings to prevent any unwanted noise and ringing. So especially when I'm doing the tremolo technique later, it really helps. For example, when I'm fretting the 10th fret here, I still have the middle and index fingers free, so I use them to lightly rest on the remaining strings as I play the tremolo like this, in order to mute them and cancel out the unwanted ringing. All right, now let's try measures 1 to 2 together in quarter notes first. Ready? 3 and 4. All right, now let's move on to measures 3 and 4. Here's how it sounds like in quarter notes. All right, start with your ring finger on the 10th fret, pluck that. Then index finger to the 7th fret, pluck that. Then ring finger to the 9th fret, pluck that. Index to the 5th fret, pluck that. And moving on to the next measure, ring finger on the 7th fret, pluck that. Index finger to the 4th fret, pluck that. And finally, middle finger to the 5th fret. And pluck the string once, doing a slight vibrato. All right, now let's try measures 3 to 4 together in quarter notes. Ready? 3 and 4 and... All right, now let's try the whole of melody A together, measures 1 to 4, in quarter notes first. Now melody A actually repeats twice through, but for this play along, we'll only do one cycle. All right, ready? 3 and 4 and... All right, now let's try measures 1 to 4 once more, but with the tremolo picking technique now, which should be in 16th notes. So the rhythm should be played as 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, and so on. All right, let's try this slowly. Ready? 3 E and a, 4 E and a. All right, now let's move on to melody B. Here's how measures 5 and 6 sound like in quarter notes. All right, so we start with your index finger on the 2nd fret, pluck that. Then middle finger to the 4th fret, pluck that. Then the ring finger to the 5th fret, pluck that. And go up to the 9th fret with your middle finger, pluck that. And moving on to the next measure, middle finger on the 7th fret, pluck that. Index finger to the 5th fret, pluck that. Then to the 4th fret with the same index finger, pluck that. And finally to the 2nd fret, also with your index finger, pluck that. All right, now let's try measures 5 to 6 together in quarter notes. Ready? 3 and 4 and. All right, now let's move on to measures 7 and 8. Here's how it sounds like in quarter notes. So we start with the open A string, pluck that. Then index finger to the 2nd fret, pluck that. Middle finger to the 4th fret, pluck that. Ring finger to the 5th fret, pluck that. Moving on to the next measure, ring finger to the 7th fret, pluck that. Middle to the 5th fret, pluck that. And finally index to the 4th fret, and plucking the string just one time with a slight vibrato. All right, now let's try measures 7 to 8 together in quarter notes. Ready? 3 and 4 and. Now at this point, you'll notice that there is a repeat sign. That means we'll have to repeat from measure 5 to 6 to 7, and then we have to skip measure 8, jumping to measure 9 in the second cycle. So let's move on to measure 9. This is how it should sound like in quarter notes. So we start with your ring finger at the 7th fret, pluck that. Then go up to the 11th fret with your ring finger again. And finally to the 12th fret with your ring finger again. But this time just plucking it once, without the tremolo, but with a slight vibrato. Now let's do a play along of the entire melody B in quarter notes with the repeats. Remember that in the second cycle, we skip measure 8 and jump to measure 9. Ready? 3 and 4 and. Repeat. All right, now let's try those same bars again, but with the tremolo picking technique in 16th notes now. Slowly. Ready? 3 E and up, 4 E and up. Three and 4 and. Alright, now let's move on to the melody A variation. Here's how measures 10 to 11 should sound like in eighth notes now because of the addition of the pull off on each note. Alright, start with your ring finger on the 10th fret of the bottom string. Pluck that again. But this time, pull off into the open A string after the first down pick, like so. Moving on to the next note, index finger on the 7th fret. Do the same pull off into the open string. Then middle finger to the 9th fret. Pluck and pull off. Index to the 5th fret. Pluck and pull off. Alright, moving on to the next measure. Middle finger on the 7th fret. Pull off. Index to the 4th fret. Pull off. And middle finger to the 5th fret. Pluck and pull off. And finally, index finger to the 2nd fret. And pull off. Alright, now let's try measures 10 to 11 together in eighth notes. Ready? 3 and 4 and. Alright, now let's move on to measures 12 to 13. This is how they should sound like in eighth notes. Alright, so we start with your ring finger on the 10th fret again. Pluck that and pull off. Same pull off into the open string. Index finger to the 7th fret. Pull off. Middle finger to the 9th fret. Pull off. Index to the 5th fret. Pull off. Moving on to the next measure. Middle finger on the 7th fret. Pull off. Index to the 4th fret. Pull off. And finally, middle finger to the 5th fret. But this time, no pull off, just plucking the string once with a slight vibrato. So very similar to the previous two measures, but with just the ending that's changed. Alright, now let's try measures 12 to 13 together in eighth notes. Ready? 3 and 4 and. Alright, now let's try the entire melody A variation together in eighth notes. The melody A variation actually repeats twice through, but for this play along, we'll only do the cycle one time. Ready? 3 and 4 and. And now let's try the same section, but with the tremolo picking technique. Now take note that it is still in 16th notes, meaning that each beat has 4 notes to be played with the same down, up motion. So for example, 10, open, down, up, 7, open, down, up, and so on. So there's still 4 notes. 1 is fretted, and the remaining 3 are the open strings. All right, let's try it very slowly. Ready? 3 E N 4 E N Congratulations on finishing the Tremolo Picking Etude, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Hi guys, so this week's lesson was a lot of fun. This is a very cool technique, a very virtuosic technique to add to your repertoire. And this is a great etude for working on it, developing speed, and just practicing. You can add this etude to your warm-up routine. It's a great one to kind of just get the fingers moving and get your right hand going. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun to play too, especially with a little bit of a classical inspiration that the melody brings. So I do want to give you a friendly reminder before we wrap up that if you did want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for the song's name. Now also on that page was that really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can hit play, watch that tab scroll across in real time, loop bars, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed learning this tune, and we'll catch you in the next lesson. Take care.